Boatsman's paradise here on the Gold Coast. There's one of these scenes looking out the Broadwater, Shirt Mirage out there on the hinterland and back onto the main drag as we know the Gold Coast. And we've got about 28 degrees here today. It's been a fabulous day and clear weather right through the weekend, and they've had a fair bit of rain over in the Gold Coast and the hinterland over the last couple of months, so everything is absolutely lush green, but that is picture perfect, isn't it? For the past 2 seasons, Wide World of Sports have been giving Aussie motorsport fans a glimpse of the action from the British 2-litre series. These machines, which have really taken Europe by storm, are now winning big support in Australia. Before we see them race here on the Gold Coast, let's find out what makes the 2-litre Tourer so special.
2-litre super touring cars. We've seen them on Wide World of Sports, and now for the first time we have them here in Surfers Paradise. This one is the Ford Mondeo 2-litre front-wheel drive supercar. In fact, the sister car to the car that took Paul Radisich to the World Championship. Not much to see under this carbon fibre airbox, but believe you me, there's a very highly sophisticated 2-litre V6 front-wheel drive unit here. Okay, let's take a look at the cockpit. First thing you'll notice is this net, a great innovation for safety. In the case of an accident, it stops any body part whatsoever from coming out further than this. Right, let's get into the workplace. The first thing you notice is the large amount of composite material that's used in this car. The carbon fibre door linings, footwell, the dashboard, even the boot has a large amount over the fuel tank. It has a sequential gearbox. By that I mean the driver doesn't have to cross over gates in the normal figure H. All he has to do is go straight up and straight down with that gear stick to change gears. There's an automatic rev limiter built into the gearbox, so he keeps his foot flat on the accelerator as he's changing up, and that automatically cuts the engine out to allow the nice gear change. To stop him from inadvertently getting reverse gear, he has to pull this red lever out before he can engage reverse. On either side of the gear stick, you'll see these 2 aluminium posts. They're to alter the front roll bar and the rear roll bar. This little black knob down here, that alters the brake bias. It puts more brake on the rear or more brake on the front, depending on what he wants. On the back, behind the seat, is the obligatory built-in fire extinguisher. Of course, that automatically goes off in the case of an emergency. In the dashboard, he has a digital readout. It's an analogue rev counter, but everything else is digitally read out. This car is limited to 8,500 revs. All the 2-litre cars have that on it. So all in all, a very sophisticated little racing car. Well, there you have it. V6, 2-litre, and this one front-wheel drive. But as I said before, we have rear-wheel drive and we have 4-wheel drive in this class. And everyone is weighted differently according to whether it is rear-wheel or front-wheel or 4-wheel. The point is this one good enough to win?
Well, that's the $64 question. Alan Jones is beside me now. You're the one who posed the question. What do you think of them?
They're good battery chargers for the 5 litres.
No, I thought that's what you might say.
No, front-wheel drive around here obviously is very tricky because you do have a lot of bumps going into the braking area, and you have a certain amount of torque steer when you accelerate, and they've 300-odd brake horsepower. You know, they're quite good, sophisticated little cars. There's no question about that. But my only question will be is that does Australia have the population big enough to support 2 major touring car categories?
Yes, well, that's another question that's going to be answered probably over the next season or so. But, of course, it's enjoyed, as you've mentioned, terrific success in England particularly. But the cars, the Ford Mondeo, what's the equivalent out here? I mean, we can't buy it. It's not something you can go in off the street and buy, is it?
No, it's not, but they are going to bring it into Australia, so therefore it will probably have a bit more relevance than what it's got at the moment. But this will be an interesting race. You know, as I said before, you have rear-wheel drive, you have 4-wheel drive, and on the Mondeo you have front-wheel drive. In theory, the 4-wheel drive Audis, which are on the front row of the grid, should have the advantage because they really will be able to rocket out of those tight, twisty corners a lot better because they're putting the footprint on the road. They're having 4 wheels drive the power rather than 2 or at the front.
Do you work hard in these?
Well, I think you work hard in anything around here. It's just a very difficult circuit, and you've really got to have your wits about you. And if you lose concentrate a little bit, you do hit the wall, because I know that for absolute fact.
BMW's development in saloon car racing, AJ, still up there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, BMW do pride themselves on putting a lot of time and effort into their motorsport, and they do pass it on into their road cars. So they're great supporters of motorsport.
One of the cars here warming up the tyres, doing a little bit of zigzag as they're coming onto the grid.
Yeah, well, of course, you do that to generate the heat across the tyre. It flexes the wall of the tyre, warms up the tyre, and therefore when you get on the berries, when you get on the accelerator from the word go, you have got a little bit of warmth in those tyres.
Well, let's hope we see some real hot action, not too much stop-start. To call all of it right now, former yachtsman and now race driver Warwick Brooklyn, and with him, our own Andrew Voss.
Thank you, Ken. And the camera in the Super Tourers is that of Tony Scott. Quite a bizarre sight to see the Volvo station wagon travelling around here at IndyCar. Warwick, the grid positions as we look at them before the warm-up lap, the Audi BMW battle, if you like. 1 and 2, Brad Jones and Greg Murphy in the Audis against Morris and Brabham in the BMWs. Morris has already struck the first blow for the year with a win at Phillip Island.
Yes, and the Audi's really giving the BMWs a bit of a shake-up here. They've put both their cars on the front row. I know Jeff Brabham and Paul Morris weren't entirely happy with the setup of the cars in qualifying, and they've been making some major changes between qualifying sessions, and once again last night they've made changes. They've changed the gear ratios and the way the car is set up. Basically, they were not happy with the way the cars were handling over the curbs and the bumpy circuits. We were looking at we had a quick look at the 850 station wagon Volvo. Very nice car, front-wheel drive, put together by Tom Walkinshaw Racing in the UK.
Bit of a flagship, if you like, for the tourers too, because it attracts so much more interest to the sport. People all of a sudden associate the Volvo to the touring, 2-litre touring racing.
Yeah, well, particularly in the British Championship last year with Lamas, he was sort of getting involved in plenty of biffo, and every time you saw the Volvo there was bits hanging off it, and it certainly puts a new aspect to the sport.
Alan Jones mentioned, as we had a look at Jeff Allen inside of the Ford Mondeo, the sequential gearbox. Well, it's interesting that the two Audis in front don't have the sequential gearbox. I guess some stage during the year they will, but at the moment they're going just with a typical H pattern.
Yeah, well, Audi in Germany at the moment is in fact doing testing with a sequential gearbox, and like a lot of these factory teams, they never introduce the new developments to the race cars until they got all the bugs ironed out of it. And I know the guys here are fairly keen to get the sequential gearboxes on these cars. They got some new wing packages coming for them, and they're coming quicker than they expected. So I think with the good result they had at Phillip Island, and certainly putting both cars on the front row here, it's really helping them in the eyes of the factory team back in Europe.
Well, that's the case with a lot of the cars that we'll see today, is the changes that will happen over the next few weeks. From people who would have seen some of the highlights from Phillip Island and then seeing the action here today, they've got a lot of packages coming in from overseas. So just within the next month or two, there's going to be some dramatic changes.
Well, from April 1, they've got a wings for all rule coming in. So at the moment, there are some of the cars that have been disadvantaged by not having the wing package, and obviously, just like in the Indy cars, but not to as much an extent, that the wings help hit the cars on the ground. They're faster through the corners, so the cars without it are at a distinct disadvantage.
Looking right now, on the left of screen, or bottom of screen, was Steve Richards, son of Jim Richards. Already had one victory today for a son of a very famous touring car driver, Dick Johnson's son, Stephen Johnson, winning the Thunder Sports. So maybe Steve Richards can follow the lead of Steve Johnson, which would certainly make a pretty handy double.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a new generation of drivers coming on, and Stephen's car, the Alfa Romeo, the first time I've seen an Alfa Romeo race in Australia for a long time. It's come out of Italy. It was a test car for Stefano Modena and Tamburini in the Italian Championship, and Stephen's only had one day of testing before he arrived. He got a few laps at Calder Park, and he's doing very well when you consider it's a new car for him. He's had very little time in the car, and so he's just getting himself sorted out.
And second from the back that we can see on the right-hand side is the only lady in the field, which is Melinda Price, driving the Toyota Corolla Seeker, car number 26, and the back markers Peter Hills and David Gross. David Gross on Thursday was involved in a bit of a spill on Thursday, the qualifying session there. We're 30 seconds away from the start of the warm-up lap.
The car of Melinda Price is an interesting story. It's the car is actually run by Box Hill TAFE. It's a program that encourages. Oh, he closed his door trying to get a bit of air there for Jeffrey Brabham at the last minute.
Just a little late. So the warm-up lap, it's a field of 16 for the Super Tourers.
We've got a car, looks like they're stalled on the grid.
That's the Mondeo, is it not?
It's certainly
Jeff
a blue
Allen.
car. Yeah, it is Jeff Allen, and that's not a good debut for his Super touring racing here in Australia. The Mondeo obviously having a few problems, but I think he may have to start at the back of the grid. They're going to try and push start it.
I guess a point to appreciate too with all these cars is the limited amount of practice time and qualifying time that they've had. With delays yesterday, the final qualifying session was cut back to just 15 minutes. For someone like Melinda Price, she had only that 15 minutes. As we look at the grid all the way through, the two Audis up front of Jones and Murphy, Greg Murphy, the young Kiwi. In 3 and 4, Paul Morris, who won both races at Phillip Island, and Jeff Brabham, a very versatile driver. Then we go further back, another BMW, that of Charlie O'Brien, and the Alfa Romeo of Steve Richards. Back to 7 on the grid, Jeff Allen and Steve Ellery. Tony Scott, the Volvo, is there, and the privateer of Paul Pickett. Matthews and Tweedy driving the blue Ford Sierra, and Bob Holden, one of the real veterans of the sport, and Melinda Price. And on row 8, of course, the back markers, Peter Hills in the Ford Sierra and the Peugeot of David Gross.
Yeah, we're looking down now into Ellery's car. They sustained some major damage earlier in the week. As you were saying about Gross before, he ran into the back of Gross at one of the chicanes and they had a big rebuild. But talking to them this morning, they're pretty happy with the way the car went back together, and considering he hasn't been at the circuit before, he hasn't done a bad job.
Well, what about the street circuit? Over 8 laps for these type of cars. It's obviously pretty tough on brakes.
Yeah, it's tough on brakes. There's a lot of work. I got the PI readout from the BMW team this morning, and there's 51 gear changes around the circuit. So there's a lot of work. Obviously, the guys with a sequential gearbox, it makes that job a lot easier. Charlie O'Brien, we just went through there. He's got the old H pattern. He's driving the BMW New Zealand team. So for the guys with the older style gearbox, it's a bit more work for them.
Well, those, of course, who watch Nine's Wide World of Sports and catch all the action from the British Championship, they seem to be on the grass more than they're on the track. There's not a whole lot of grass around this circuit. There's a lot of concrete walls that they might like to taste at some stage, but it can get a mad helter-skelter out in the British form of racing. I guess people will draw comparisons to what they see today and what we've seen over the past few years from Britain as they come round into the main straight to square up for the start.
Well, the sort of racing we've been seeing in Britain is, it's very competitive. The formula over there has been going for a few years now, and there's so many factory teams, and so much up for grabs that the budgets are a bit bigger. But certainly the racing we saw between the Audis and the BMWs at Phillip Island, they didn't mind swapping a bit of paint, and there's certainly some tough racing down there, and I think we might see the same here today.
So all the way down to the grid, the two Audis showing the way, Jones and Murphy. Giving word that Bob Holden is in fact out of the race, the BMW. So we're back to 15 starters for this, over 8 laps, and another 8 laps coming up tomorrow. The view from Tony Scott's car as he puts it into number 9 on the grid, the 5th row.
We want to watch for the Quattros off the line. The 4-wheel drive will help them get going. They've been practicing their starts. They weren't as good off the line as I thought they may be at Phillip Island, but apparently they've been working on that.
It's Jones on the right of screen, Brad Jones. He's got the yellow rear vision mirrors there on the side, and on the left his teammate Greg Murphy. And the ominous sight just behind, the Diet Coke team of Morris and Brabham. And they're away in the Super Tourers. And it looks like Murphy has got the better off the line from Jones. So no team orders for the start. Allen making a move up. And it is Murphy, I believe, who has taken the advantage as they go into that first chicane. Greg Murphy has the advantage. Close-up racing straight behind him. And Greg Murphy gets the better of teammate Brad Jones from the start. Back to the two BMWs. The second of the chicanes in the street side of Surfers Paradise. Jeff Allen looks like he's made a very good move off the line from 7. Further back, that's Ellery just gone through picture. And all the way back to the tail of the field. Great start for the young Kiwi, Greg Murphy, very cocky character.
Yes, he hasn't been to this circuit before. When you consider that Bradley Jones has been doing NASCAR and OSCAR around here for a few years, Murphy just jumped in here and really hooked into it. So pretty impressive start for him. He says he loves the street circuits, loves hooking into it. And the car's going down the back straight now.
They brake at about 200 kilometres an hour here, and that's where the Audis have the advantages under brakes. I'll get you to point out the advantages in a moment, Warwick, as we look at the order. Murphy, Jones, Morris and Brabham, the two BMWs, Charlie O'Brien. And at the moment, right up there is Greg Murphy, and setting quite a pace indeed.
Yeah, Murphy's just pulled a Volvo over his teammate Brad Jones. We've got Jeff Brabham third, Paul Morris, Charlie O'Brien, the Volvo, Ellery in the BMW, and Jeff Allen in the Mondeo. He's got past all the privateers and trying to hook up with the factory teams.
So Stephen Richards, probably the driver who was back at 6th on the grid in the Alfa Romeo, who didn't fare as well as some. Oh, the two Diet Coke BMWs get a little sideways. We may have just seen a bit of excess baggage thrown off the one side.
Well, Morris, he's been impatient to get past Brabham for a few laps now, and he's tried to have a go under brakes, give it a little tap, but they've kept both cars on the road. And I think Frank Gardner would be happy to see both his cars sitting on a wall this early in the race.
So one lap down, and Greg Murphy, the Kiwi, on top in the Audi, ahead of his teammate Brad Jones, and it's a fair sort of gap that Murphy's opening up. As we look at the dice again, the two teammates, well, it was tail to front. And we're back with the Diet Coke team right now. It's a fair battle. Brabham holding the advantage over his teammate Morris. And I say again, Morris, the man who won both races at Phillip Island. And down at Phillip Island for round one of the Super Tourers, Brad Jones was second in both races. Brabham picked up a third in race 2. So he's looking to pick up his act even.
Jeff Brabham may not have driven on this circuit in particular a lot, but racing Indy cars and sports cars in the United States, where they do a lot of their racing on street circuits, he feel pretty at home here. I know that he wasn't entirely happy with the setup of the car, but he's certainly hooking into it here. He won't like the Audis getting away from him.
In qualifying with the BMWs, the Diet Coke team, Frank Gardner's team, a tenth of a second between the two drivers. Morris did hold the advantage. And right now they go again. Morris trying all he can to get past Brabham. And they really do use all of the track, these Super Tourers. And we stick with the BMWs.
And just in the background, we're getting just a few glimpses of Stephen Richards in the Alfa Romeo starting to apply some pressure to Charlie O'Brien. So we've got still Brabham leading Morris, with Morris very keen to get past. He might have a go under brakes here.
It's a fair gap between second back to third, and then fourth, and he is gone. So Brabham's in trouble, or rather Brabham's fine. Paul Morris is the man in trouble and has been left behind, and Jeff Brabham's left all alone in third spot.
Yeah, well, Morris came through that corner, and all of a sudden the car just slowed. So obviously mechanical problems. I don't know if he hit Brabham hard enough earlier on the race to affect anything, for anything in the crash to affect what's happened to him, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But out front, Greg Murphy from New Zealand in the Quattro. Second, Brad Jones. Then third will be Jeff Brabham in the Diet Coke BMW.
It should put Charlie O'Brien up to fourth. It does, and now Stephen Richards up to fifth, so he's making ground. We're with Tony Scott. That's what he has behind him. Tony Scott currently running in sixth position in the Volvo station wagon. You're half expecting to see the wife in the passenger seat and the two kids in the back.
We're watching Jeff Allen close in on the Volvo. He's just taken Stephen Richards. So Allen, after having problems on the grid, has walked his way all the way through the field, closes up on the back of Tony Scott's Volvo. I'd say he's going to have a real go here under brakes in a second.
Well, how good is this? The Ford Mondeo and the Volvo. We'd love to do this out in the open road, wouldn't you? The Mondeo right up the back of Tony Scott's Volvo. Now he's going to make the move. Not this time, as they have plenty of pace down this part of the track. We'll get it up to sixth before the chicane.
If you listen closely to the audio in the Volvo, you can hear the wheel spinning. Tony was saying the car wheel spins beginning out of the corners, and the Mondeo's through.
Allen's got him. So now we're looking out the front, and we get a good shot of the rear of Jeff Allen. British driver out here. He'll be competing in round 2 of the Super Tourers at Orange Park, and after that his plan's a little up in the air. So Scott is back to 7th, and Allen moves up. So at the top of the order, it's Greg Murphy leading Brad Jones. We'll take a break and come back with more Super Touring action from the Gold Coast. Welcome back. We're watching Super Touring action. We're on lap 5. Greg Murphy leading Brad Jones, his teammate in the Audi. Brabham third, the BMW, the Diet Coke BMW, back to Charlie O'Brien. And Steve Richards in the Alfa Romeo rounds up the top 5. At the moment, the break between first and second is out to a little over a second. And Greg Murphy, the team order will be certainly put to the test. Brad Jones driving the number 1 car, Warwick, but let's find out what's going to happen over the next few laps.
Well, the team is run by Brad's brother Kim, and it'll be interesting to see whether, as you said, whether there's any team orders. But at the moment, Murphy really got the bit between his teeth. He's been out there since the start of the race, and he's maintaining that gap. Jones closed in a little bit, but I don't think he seems to be doing a lot to him at the moment. Brabham about 5 seconds further back in the Diet Coke BMW, and then another 3 seconds back to Charlie O'Brien in the New Zealand BMW.
And the distance now, or the time between first and second, is now just under a second. Greg Murphy, the young Kiwi, as we go back further through the field. Charlie O'Brien just in front of the Alfa Romeo of Steve Richards. That's where we'll stick with the action at the moment. Little lock up there from young Richards. It's 4th and 5th. O'Brien holding down 4th spot.
I was talking to some of the other competitors before, and they're saying this Alfa Romeo of Stephen Richards is very fast down the straight. That is a little bit susceptible under brakes. It tends to lock brakes a little bit, so they haven't got that quite right. But very quick down the chutes, this front-wheel drive Alfa.
Well, that was right. One driver I spoke to was Paul Morris in the BMW, and in qualifying he found himself stuck behind a few drivers in occasions, but one of them was Stephen Richards, and he was surprised by the grunt down the straight that the Alfa Romeo has. Charlie O'Brien in qualifying was another who wasn't caught behind one of the faster cars. He was caught behind one of the slower cars, and he only really had 1 lap yesterday to set a good qualifying time. So Charlie O'Brien will be happy with the progress that's being made this weekend, and he'll be happier still if he can keep Stephen Richards well behind him.
Well, this Alfa Romeo won the British Touring Car Championship, or the sister car to this car, won the British Championship last year, so certainly the Alfa's been the gun package. Charlie had a lot of laps around here in NASCARs, so he certainly had a lot of circuit knowledge, and Alan's starting to close up now on Stephen Richards.
It's great to see, just getting a little airborne as they go through. On screen, the young man, Stephen Richards. He'd be the baby in this field, I guess. Well, 22 years of age, no older than, or no younger than Greg Murphy, the leader of the race, but he has got a fair sort of record to live up to, which I know he's probably been reminded of plenty of times. That's the gap between first and fifth, over 13 seconds. But at the moment, we're looking at the battle for 4th, 5th and 6th, because you've got to put Alan right in there. He's getting right on the hammer of Richards.
Alan really starting to apply pressure to the back of the Alfa. Richards, he's had plenty of experience, you know, maybe not in these cars so much, but he's driving his Oscar a lot. He won the Drive to Europe series, so he's done plenty of miles, and he won't just hand it over to Jeff Allen.
So the power of the Ford Mondeo up against the Alfa Romeo. Again, Richards gives that impression that every time he gets to that first chicane, he just locks them up. And Allen has closed the gap all the way in. Less than 0.4 of a second, less than 4/10. And Allen now contemplating a move.
Allen's going to have a big go here under brakes. I think, I don't know if he's close enough. No, he's going to pull back in, try and get a good run out of this corner. Down to second gear. They'll move up to third. Then back down to second, try and get a nice smooth run onto the back straight. Allen really going close to the walls there.
This is where he made the move on Tony Scott. Can he do the same to young Stephen Richards? And at the moment, Charlie O'Brien left alone in 4th position. Allen now just looking to pull out a shade. Let's see what he can do under brakes this time. Jeff Allen making the move on the inside, and it's tight, he takes him. Jeff Allen gets past young Stephen Richards. It was almost like playing chicken as they went into the corner.
Well, he had the draft going up the back straight. He had the Alfa's toe, pulled out, took him under brakes, so nicely done. Now he's got Charlie O'Brien in his sights, really using the curbs.
Oh, Richards, he takes it. Right-hand side. Disappointed to lose his position, and there's the damage you can see to Stephen Richards, and we'll put him out of the race.
Well, let's see, it doesn't look good. I'm surprised that the car's going. I mean, he glanced that wall. There's some tyres there to absorb some of the shock. But I'm surprised to see that Alpha still going, so let's see whether he pulls into the pits or attempts to keep going.
And now we go back to the last lap. The two Audis out in front, Murphy ahead of Jones, but the gap now is less than 0.4 of a second. Here's the replay of young Stephen Richards. After being passed by Jeff Allen, loses it a little, and he'll be very disappointed. I know they're low on parts. The Alfa Romeo team was hoping to get through this without too many problems and head off to round 2 in Oran Park. But back to the leaders. Murphy with his slight advantage over Brad Jones. Again, we say, well, the team ought to be put to the test.
Well, the gap is down to 0.3 of a second, so Jones certainly closing in. Be very interesting to see what happens here. There's not far of this race to go now. Onto the back straight.
Well, will he go for the same move as we've just seen Allen do on Richards as they get to the chicane at the back of the track?
Well, I actually saw Murphy, I think I saw Murphy giving a little wave there to Brad Jones.
And here goes Jones, up on the inside and takes him.
Yeah, so Murphy's let the team leader through there at the last chicane, so...
That'd hurt a little when you're young and you want to prove yourself, and that is certainly the job of Greg Murphy. Brad Jones is our new leader, and it looks like the Audis will finish 1-2 and in team order.
Well, I suppose he wants to have full-time employment, so...
Who's paying the bills, I guess?
Yeah, that's right. So he wants to be racing at Oran Park next week.
Jeff Brabham's back in third in the BMW, then the BMW of Charlie O'Brien in fourth. They're still going close.
I thought Murphy was going to have a little go there. He might have changed his mind.
Jones and Murphy. Still coming up to some of the back markers. I mean, you don't want to make an error. If Jones does make an error, Murphy will be, I guess, only too happy to go past. He's not going to sit there and twiddle his thumbs.
Well, now we're on the last corner, coming up to the finish. So it's going to be an Audi 1-2. That's the first time for them in Australia. So for the team, a great effort, and certainly they've dominated.
Side by side, they go across the line. Not much in it. Jones gets the money ahead of Murphy. Brad Jones, second at Bathurst last year. And taking out, Jeff Brabham takes third spot. So the two Audis, 1-2, Brad Jones, Greg Murphy, Jeff Brabham third, Charlie O'Brien fourth, and Jeff Allen in the Ford Mondeo fifth. That's the Super Touring cars for this Saturday at Indy. Another 8 laps coming up tomorrow. Right now, we'll take a break on Nine's Wide World of Sports.
Gold Coast IndyCar weekend, and beautiful weather and terrific racing, and around about 25 to 28 degrees has been the temperature up and down the coast here today, so we've had it just perfect. Let's take a look at the results of the 2-litre event, which we just saw here. You saw Jones, Murphy, Brabham, O'Brien, Allen and Richards. They're the top 6 placings. A little bit disappointing from the point of view, Jonesy, that the racing wasn't closer. Of course, the two Audis made it a race between the teams, but other than that, it wasn't much as far as the contest was concerned.
No, it was pretty spread out, and the two Audis whizzed away. Front four-wheel drive out of the corners here, of course, major advantage.
This is Wide World of Sports. We'll be back after the break with more from the Gold Coast IndyCar Grand Prix.